Hello and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we're playing Star Wars Outlaws, and I'm going to be focusing on something that's slightly more negative. I already did a video showing some of the things about the game that I think are genuinely well done. Things like the unique skill system, and of course the, quite frankly, beautiful landscapes and well-crafted worlds that we have to explore in this game. But in today's video I'm going to be talking about some things that are just plain not good. And the game, as I said in my first impressions review, is a very mediocre game. And so it makes sense that there's going to be some stuff in the game that I quite frankly just do not like. And so just starting off with an extremely basic one is, I don't want to be how bad the character models are. Outside of cutscenes, and in cutscenes they generally look decent, but outside of cutscenes, everyone looks terrible. It looks like a game from 15 years ago. I mean, Kay herself looks passable, I guess, but nowhere near what we're getting out of a lot of other games here. And that goes for everything. It goes for just their standard, the facial resolution and everything. They look so polished and shiny and smooth. Nobody looks real at all. And aside from that, their animations are of course laughably bad. Like here we're witnessing a conversation. We of course can't hear the conversation. We're right next to them, but they're somehow so quiet that we can't pick up any of their words. But they kind of just stand here, one with her arms locked permanently behind her back, and the other one every once in a while tilting her head and flapping her arm. It's not that big of a deal because they're background characters, but it comes up every time you have a conversation with someone. If your mouth or their mouth even moves while you're trying to talk to a trader or something like that, that's impressive. And when it does, it never syncs up to the words that you're saying. So just on a rough note, I love the worlds, and I think a lot of this stuff, like, this looks great. You look around and this is a beautiful world, well crafted, looks very Star Wars, but still very new. It's just disappointing that none of the character models were given that level of fidelity, I would say. But that's a relatively minor complaint, but that is the first thing about it. The second one is about how shallow this game is. As I've said before, with this game in particular, and lots of action adventure games like Star Wars Outlaws, it is as wide as an ocean and as deep as a puddle. There's absolutely no level of customization here. There's no, the collecting system is stupid. It doesn't reward you. I know not everybody cares about collecting things and customizing themselves in a game. They just want to be able to jump in and play. And for people that like arcade games, yeah, sure, this is like that. But here's a problem I have. So if we go into the equipment section and into inventory, you can see you have a couple different categories of things that you can collect. You have materials, key parts, which are things you use for upgrading your ship, speeder, or gun, valuables, and quest items. And that's it. You can pick up guns throughout this game. Like if you've killed a stormtrooper, you can pick up their E11 blaster or whatever, and you can use it until you run out of ammo, but that's it. Then you drop it immediately. If you try to do anything else, you drop it. You can't collect guns. You can't choose to make anything different. It's a game where you're playing in the Star Wars universe as an outlaw navigating the underworld, and you're just stuck with this generic pistol, which, like I've said in a previous video, the pistol's fine, and you can customize the appearance to some extent. Like, you can't do anything major, but you can unlock and find or buy, different skins for it, essentially, and you can upgrade your different components of it, so you can switch the way it works through the plasma one. So you have your standard light, your rapid fire, which kind of makes it more of like a machine gun, and your heavy fire, which makes it, gives it a lot more punch behind each shot. Then you have ion, that's particularly effective at taking out things like cameras and droids, and you have two different settings for that, burst and surge. And then you've got your power shot. This one is, it's fine for taking out a group of enemies that are all located close to each other. I guess the other thing about it is, considering how bullet spongy they make the enemies, even though you're firing a extremely fast traveling bolt of highly treated plasma at them, they can still somehow tank hits from it a bunch. So I guess this is useful for that, because you can actually kill people in one shot. You can customize the gun you have, but it's just stupid to me that in a game where you are in a world like Star Wars with so many famous different styles of blasters and stuff like that, that it won't let you choose to switch out your weapon, whether that's equipping a long gun on your back or just swapping out for, a West Star blaster like Jango Fett, or the DL-55, I think is what it's called, for Han Solo's blaster, stuff like that. You should be able to do that. That's a simple enough thing that it feels cheap to leave it out. And the same thing goes for your outfits. Now, in the game, you do get a level of customization of your clothing. You can customize your jacket, your belt, and your boots. And some of them are just cosmetic, and some of them actually give you gameplay changes. And on top of that, you can also just change the appearance of it. So it doesn't lock you into doing anything. You can equip whatever you want and make it look like whatever you want as far as things that you have unlocked. So if you want to look like Lando Calrissian, you can equip the sabak shark pants. If you want to look like Han Solo, you can equip the Kessel Runner outfit. So there's certain things like that, sure, that gives you some level of customization. But again, it's Star Wars. When people think Outlaws, they think of the various famous roguelike characters that we've gotten to know in Star Wars games. Your Greedos, your Boba and Jango Fett's, your Cad Banes, etc. You know, your Mandalorians, whatever the case may be. Being able to change your gear and make yourself more versatile is something that I think a lot of people are expecting out of a game like this. Being able to actually put on armor that gives you a substantial boost. I mean, Beskar's mentioned in the game as something that exists. Maybe if you make enough money, why shouldn't you be able to get yourself some different armor pieces to make yourself a little bit more effective in combat, or maybe a jetpack, or, like I've said before, bigger or different weapons. When you're exploring, even early in the game, you'll find things like bowcasters sitting as static decorations, but you can't pick one up, despite the fact that the developers had to know that by including something as cool and iconic as a bowcaster, players were going to immediately see that, latch onto it, and want to be able to use it, but you can't. So it's an annoyingly shallow system that is incredibly immersion breaking, because if you were actually in this universe, you would have the ability to buy, find, or steal all sorts of weapons and different components to make yourself more than just someone running around on their feet. How shallow the game is, it just turns it into an arcade game that, quite frankly, sure, if that's what they want to make, they can make whatever game they want, but I'm going to criticize it every time a company makes it because it's a bad decision. You're making an open world action-adventure game set in the Star Wars universe. You should be able to have a little bit more choice than what shirt you put on. So how shallow the game is the second thing that is just truly horrible about Star Wars Outlaws. The next, I guess, 2 points in this are both related to stealth, and they're both atrocious. Now, I'm in a place where I'm not actually in a stealth mission, but it gives you a general idea. So the problem with this game's combat is in how it's implemented. They clearly wanted to make a stealth game because, I guess, to pad the runtime and whatever. You know, I don't like stealth games, so I automatically have a bias against them. I'm not saying I've never played a good one. I like Hitman, and those are stealth games, but they're also extremely creative combat in those games, and so it doesn't feel like you're just running around distracting people and then punching them, or occasionally stunning them with your stun setting on your blaster. It's a horrible, horrible stealth system, and the problem with that is, it's not optional. The vast majority of this game and all of the missions in it, not to mention just the general locations in the game, lock you into stealth as your only option. You have to sneak around constantly, distracting people with nicks and knocking them out. It's very annoying. It's not fun at all. All it is tedious. And it definitely drags down what otherwise would be a halfway decent combat system. I know I, along with probably everyone else that was interested in this game even a little bit, was looking forward to a Star Wars game that you didn't play as a Jedi. You know, picturing a Han Solo type playthrough where you're kind of a gunslinger. You're not a gunslinger in this game. You have a gun, and you can shoot it sometimes, not when you're in a city. Even when you're in one of these gang hideouts, you can't even pull out your gun, because apparently, you know, a Ubisoft-produced Disney Star Wars game where you could actually blast people as an outlaw is, you know, that's out of the question. So it's just tedious how you get locked into stealth for literally everything, and on top of that, the stealth system in the game sucks. And if that wasn't enough, the next point about that is, so keep in mind everything I just said about being locked into stealth for everything and how the system is super limited. There's also a ton of insta-failing in the stealth. Something that, you know, used to be pretty common in PlayStation 2 games, so like early 2000s type stuff, where you'd get spotted and then you couldn't talk your way out of it or fight your way out of it. If, depending on what the situation, you just fail. You just fail and get reverted back to whatever, you know, the last checkpoint you went through or the beginning of the mission. It is so annoying. It's bad enough that they won't just let us run through and be a gunslinging, you know, reckless blasting people. You have to be stealthy. But then on top of that, if everything goes south, they just arrest you and you have to restart. It's so freaking annoying. It's horrible. And it's probably my biggest complaint about the game in general. See? Like that. Went to pick a lock and got caught and auto-failed, and now we get reverted and lose some reputation. It's just a really, really annoying system. And the next thing is something I don't have a visual cue for, which, you know, go figure, given how much of this video I haven't been prepared for. But it's just how contrived the game is. So they touted this as the first open world Star Wars game. First of all, that's simply not accurate. As far as open worlds go, yes, you get into these cells and you can explore around them at your leisure. It's not a linear story. You can run around, take missions, do all sorts of stuff. So in that way, it's an open world. But that being said, it is like the most limited open world I've ever seen or played. And I'm someone who has played way more games than the average bear. You know, you get into these hubs where you can kind of go around, but they're all really on the rails, which, I mean, when you see how these streets look and everything, you've got these big unnavigatable areas in between. So it just means that you spend more time running around. That's really all it does is, again, it's just a system that pads the runtime of an otherwise bare bones game. On top of that, you have areas that will just be locked off. There's no explanation for it. You can hack into some doors, but you can't hack into to get through others or pick the locks or whatever. You can turn off some force fields, but you can't turn off others. They'll be story locked, and then you can only get in them for that mission, so it doesn't matter if you've got all your tools prior to that. If you're not doing the mission where it's specific, you can't get into those sections, and once you do get into them, you're in there temporarily, and then you can't ever go in again. So the problem with calling this an open world game and then restricting it to that extent is it makes the entire experience feel on the rails. You might as well be playing a linear game. But the difference is linear games are usually tighter, better constructed, have a lot better writing in them. This game has none of that stuff. The character work sucks. As far as characters in the game go, you do come across a lot of people. The vast majority of them are entirely uninteresting, if not outright dislikable. A couple key exceptions. The only one I can think of is ND5. He's a droid that you come across relatively early in the game, and he becomes kind of a sidekick for you. I genuinely like ND5. I think that the voice acting for him was done in a way that is compelling, because he's a commando robot, or commando droid from the Confederation of Independent Systems, from the Clone Wars, but he's been kind of reprogrammed and he wears a coat, and so he's an interesting character, which is something that you cannot say for the vast majority of characters in this game, and his performance is good, and he's the only character that sticks with me at all. Kay is boring as hell. Like I said, my problem with her is just that she's not an interesting character. She never says anything that's interesting. Her motivation it's laughably obscure. Like, what it turns into is basically you have this death mark and she has to get rid of the death mark, but she also thinks she needs a bunch of credits to be free of this so she's not getting oppressed by the system. And I guess that's the message they're going for, is that the only way to not be oppressed by the system is to have a bunch of money. So all other people are inherently oppressed. They can't live free or happy. They have to be ridiculously wealthy or else they won't be. And so she has to steal that money, otherwise she can't possibly have a good life. But so she gets this death mark put on and she wants to get rid of it. That kind of makes sense, but then you realize that she didn't need to get the death mark in the first place. Her motivation was initially, I guess, for riches and to get off Canto Bight, and so she needed to do this heist or whatever to do that, and then out of that she gets death mark, and that motivates her for the rest of the game. But it's basically her motivation is she's looking for motivation, and it's so bad that every single time it kind of comes up in conversation with another character, it just gets skirted around. They never actually give you any reasoning. She's got these kind of Assassin's Creed style backstory flashbacks that kind of happen spaced out throughout the story. Not compelling at all. I'm sure it's supposed to make you like her more or maybe connect to her more because she's, younger in these flashbacks. It hasn't had that effect on me. She's a painfully boring character. Nyx is all right. It's a cute little animal. It's just a gameplay mechanic. It's Atreus from God of War. It's BD1 from the Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order games. It's just a tool for you to use to do things. There's no connection there. Vale's fine. Another character that just makes absolutely no sense. Jalen Vrax, enigmatic in certain ways, kind of interesting. You got Lady Kira, who is, now I've never watched Solo, a Star Wars story. I didn't watch any Star Wars movies after The Last Jedi. So, from what I understand, she was played by Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones in there. And so she kind of sounds like that in here. I wonder if it's the same person or if they just got someone to impersonate her. Somewhat interesting. I don't really like Crimson Dawn in general, but when she's in the mission, it's kind of entertaining. Other than that, you get some classic Star Wars characters like Jabba the Hutt and Bib Fortuna, but they don't really do much in the game, at least not based on where I'm at so far. So it's cool to see them when you do, but you don't see them much. And then you have just horribly bland and forgettable people like Rooster Trace, Ayla Bren, and CeeLo Rovic, your experts that you come into contact connect with, and even Quint Cressad. I was excited when I met this one. I was like, ooh, a Western sheriff gunslinger type person. That's interesting. I was wrong. She's not interesting. She's like everyone else in this game. Just a puppet that's there for a couple seconds to give Kay a thing or to tell Kay a thing, and then their characterization is completely gone after that. So, not compelling at all. The characters, the writing, the dialogue, all of it falls flat. It's incredibly two-dimensional. The game itself has no teeth. It's as rounded off as, SpongeBob when he lost all his holes. And there's not much special here. Like I said, the worlds are impressive. The combat, if you mod it a little bit like I usually do, isn't horrible, because then I just run around blasting everyone with my gun instead of worrying about stealth or bullet spongy enemies. Flying the ship around, I guess, is kind of fun, but the dogfights are really limited and you can't really do a whole lot in space because you just have a small pocket in orbit around each planet. If you're not a huge Star Wars fan, again, I said this in my first impressions review, I cannot recommend this game. Even if you do what I did and use the Ubisoft subscription thing, so you're only paying $18 for a month of it and then probably never going to play it again, it's just not a good deal. It's not a very good game unless you're a mega Star Wars fan. It's very mediocre, and there are a lot of things about it that fall way beyond mediocre and get into categories that I absolutely hate, which is what we've covered in this video. But that's all for today. I hope this all recorded well, because I never know if it's going to with this game because of this weird aspect ratio that it has. But that's all for today. If you have anything that you hate about this game, or maybe if you disagree and you like some of the things that I said I really dislike, let me know down in the comment section below. I'm always interested to read that type of stuff. But that's all for today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you like this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.